How to love. To love, you must get out of the way. In love, there is no I, there is no you. I and you have to be dropped from I love you. Only when you begin to get out of the way, it becomes but natural to love. Love, in its purity, is the natural, the very fundamental expression of the soul. Now, one may say it is not very easy to get out of the way. It is not very easy to abolish the ego. Now, until one has abolished the ego, what does one do? Does one stop loving? Or does one still love? And if so, how does one love? How can one begin to walk on the path of love until the ego is abolished? One must tap into the heart's yearning to give oneself. Through self-giving, you will begin to walk the path of love. It is in self-giving, in the spirit of service, in offering oneself so totally, that you will find the ego beginning to get abolished and you're beginning to touch the pulse of love. As Sri Aurobindo very beautifully says, the will of self-giving forces away the veil between God and man. It annuls every error and annihilates every obstacle. Through the progressive purification of self-giving, of offering yourself, you will begin to touch a love that is free of demand, that is full of surrender, sweetness, and self-giving, that makes no claim, imposes no condition, indulges in no bargain whatsoever, and is free of the pettiness and the violences of jealousy, anger, pride, because these qualities is not what the great force of love composes of. In the beginning, you are perhaps able to give yourself, to be able to serve, only when there is some form of reciprocity, only when you're loved back in return. However, as you slowly start walking the path of love, you're able to give yourself, to be able to serve and love without expecting to be loved in return. But there is still somewhere a part of you that is looking to be acknowledged, to be appreciated. Sometimes we find ourselves in a relationship saying that I've given myself to you so totally, so unconditionally, and even if you cannot, give back to me whatever I've done for you, can you please at least acknowledge the contribution that we are making? So when we find ourselves saying such a line, that's an indicator that our self-giving, our service, our love is still not total, it's still not pure, it is still not all-encompassing, it is still not integral, it is still not transformative. So as you further begin to walk the path of love, you're really just able to give yourself so totally for the pure joy of self-giving, for the pure joy of loving. Love itself becomes its own reward. Similarly, in certain situations and relationships, you will find that you are more easily able to give, with a certain sense of purity. But then there are other relationships where you're not able to give with that same sense of purity. That's because we often seek to love our near and dear ones and not necessarily the divine. However, the movement of love is always towards the divine. It goes through people, situations, work, but these are only pathways, only doorways to loving the divine. To love the divine and to love for the joy of loving is not easy, and one's heart may break 100 times before it breaks open, before it widens and becomes like a blossoming lotus. As Kahlil Gibran in The Prophet says, "For even as love crowns you, so shall he crucify you. Even as he is for your growth, so is he for your pruning." Allow it to prune you. Allow love to open your heart, for even the pain of love is sweet. You must not seek love's peace and pleasure only, but be the hero warrior who wholeheartedly wishes to embrace the totality and the fullness of the force and power of love. When love brings you pain, if you know how to embrace it to widen your heart, it will really take you to a greater and greater ocean of love. When difficulties, pain comes on the path of love, most certainly you must embrace it with an attitude of learning and growth. However, you must never ever proactively invite difficulties and invite pain. In fact, the path of love can really be like a bed of roses. It can really be like a sunlit path where you move from light to greater light. If there is a touch of the soul from within, the path of love need not be painful. Love dwells in us like an unopened flower, awaiting a rapid moment of the soul. Even if there is a tiny little opening, very tiny, at times like a pinhead, even if there is a tiny little opening to the soul, naturally the force of love begins to rush in. When you reach in contact with the divine's love, you begin to see love in everything and in all circumstances.